Hello, everybody. Welcome to the RSR Sports Podcast for the first official episode of Roche Roundup. Matt Lapola here, along with the man himself, Rob Roche. Rob, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Matt. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited. You know, we met not too long ago about starting up this podcast, and I've been looking forward to it ever since. Why don't you give some of our listeners a little background about yourself?
Sure, Matt. Well, I'm a certified NFL agent, and I've been an agent for about 17 years now. Started in 2000, and represent NFL players, some coaches, a few broadcasters, and some of my guys are Justin Tucker, Baltimore Ravens, Leonte Carroo, Miami Dolphins, and about 7 or other 8 players in the NFL.
And what's your background in terms of education?
Yeah, I'm Jersey bred. I went to College of New Jersey down in Ewing, and then I went to Seton Hall University School of Law.
Very nice. So when you first got started out, before you had your own firm, where were you working?
Well, I had a different path a little bit. I always knew I wanted to do what I'm doing now, which is represent football players, because I was always into football. But so I went to law school, Seton Hall, and then in the summer times of law school, I worked in a courthouse in Morris County in the criminal division. And from there, I did a clerkship with the judge after I got out. And then I volunteered on Jason Sehorn, who was defensive back for the Giants. I volunteered on his charity golf tournament and made some contacts there, got registered as an agent. And then once I got done with my clerkship, I worked for a small firm for a few years where I started my own sports practice there. And my first client that I represented was Neil Rackers, who got drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals. So first year I got a player drafted. I'm like, wow, this is going to be easy. This is going to be no, piece of cake.
Mm-hmm.
But no. So that's how I got my start. I started my own practice. I interviewed with the NFL Management Council, and stuff like that, and wasn't able to obtain employment. So then I started my own practice.
And was it difficult getting going in an industry like this? I'm sure, like you said, it's no piece of cake. What were some of those challenges early on?
Yeah, there's like no roadmap to how to do it. I remember when I passed the agent's test down in Washington. You had to go down to Washington, take a seminar, and take an exam on the CBA. And I remember being told I passed it, and then saying to myself, okay, how do I get clients? Like, how does this happen? And, the way I was able to do it was just, by sweat equity, just keep working hard and recruiting players, going out and talking to them, talking to their parents. And I remember when I signed Neil Rackers, he was the last visit I had that season. That
Wow.
recruiting season. And I remember sitting in the airports at St. Louis Lambert Airport for my flight home saying, I really hope I get this kid. I think he's going to be a good player. And, got the call a few days later that he was signing with me.
And now here you are, 17 years later, and you've got one of the bigger names in football, I think, in Justin Tucker. One of the premier kickers in the league. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved with him.
With Justin, what I did was I recruited him as well, and I had developed a good reputation with regards to the kickers. And with Justin, I recruit him just like any other player, and send him letters, let him know I'm watching him, and talk to him, stuff like that. But then got to know him as a person, got to know his family as well, and he comes from a great family, really good people. And, signed Justin. He didn't get drafted, and it's an interesting story. He actually, coming out of University of Texas, we had a couple teams looking at him. One was the Cowboys, one of them was a punter, one was the Bears, one of them was a combo guy, punter and kicker. And we went with Baltimore because we believed that was a shot we could compete and win a job. And he got zero signing bonus, like $0.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but he had an opportunity, $0 bonus-wise, but an opportunity for a longer career and a shot to win a job. And it's pretty cool because the next signing bonus that he got was for $6 million. So he went from $0 to $6 million.
That's a big jump.
Big jump. Yeah. So it's really cool. It's cool to see somebody help get in the league and help start his process, and then he just kicked some butt once he got in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He always says, I didn't want to just push the door down. He's like, I want to kick it in when he came into the league.
That's the attitude you need.
Got to have it.
Absolutely. So here we are in our studio here on the campus of Seton Hall University. We're where I'm a student. We're here at WSOU, which is the school's radio station on 89.5 FM.
And Matt, you do some broadcasting yourself, correct?
I do. I am on sports staff and news staff here at the station. So I call all sorts of sports here at Seton Hall, from baseball, softball, soccer, and fortunately I get to call Division I basketball.
There we go.
In one of the best conferences, the Big East.
Yeah.
I've been definitely blessed in my time here at the Hall. I'm entering into my senior year now, looking forward to hopefully what will be a good season for the Pirates in all of their sports.
Do they have any players for the NBA draft coming up next week?
Well, initially you had two players say that they wanted to declare for the draft, and they were Kadeen Carrington and Angel Delgado.
Okay.
And they said they were going to go in without an agent. So the odds were already stacked against them. And then as time went on, I think it kind of sank in that even if they did get drafted, they'd be late in the second round, probably end up in the D-League, maybe not even end up making a team. So eventually they just decided to come back for their senior seasons. So this upcoming season, we're going to have 4 seniors on the starting lineup, which is something you don't see a lot in college basketball nowadays. But
I always root for the Pirates.
Absolutely.
Being a Seton Hall University School of Law alumni, you always root for the Pirates.
Definitely. And I'm looking forward to that season starting up in just a few months from now. I feel like the season just ended.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of college basketball.
No, well, listen, I appreciate you, working with me on this podcast.
Of course.
That's great.
So let's get right into it. There's a lot going on in the sports world, but I think we have a good opportunity to tackle things from a unique perspective. That of a sports agent. How does a guy like Rob Roche look at sports differently from the average viewer or the average, sports worker, the average athlete? So you look at what's going on in the NBA right now.
Yep.
The Golden State Warriors just winning their second championship in 3 years after 3 straight trips to the finals, having what can only be described as a super team. You have all NBA talent in guys like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. And then heading into this 2016-17 season, they pick up Kevin Durant, who I think is a pretty solid pick for the second best basketball player on the planet.
Yes.
And let me ask you something, Rob. When you first heard that news before the start of this past NBA season, what was your initial thought?
Well, I have to tell you, I have 2 boys of my own. I have a 16-year-old Luke and a 13-year-old Robert, and they're both major avid basketball fans. And my younger guy, Robert, he was big on OKC. Loved OKC, loved Durant and the whole thing.
Right.
And I remember he woke up that morning and found out that Durant actually went to Golden State. He was devastated. It's cool because you get the fan perspective from your own family.
Yeah.
And he was devastated. When I looked at it and said, okay, why would Durant go to Golden State? He didn't max out at Golden State. It took a little less money to go to Golden State.
Right.
But the reason is he wanted to win. And that's as an agent, you always got to gauge what are the goals of the player, of the client. And one, obviously on top of his list, was to win. And he figured the best opportunity to win was to go to Golden State. Now, it can be disputed that if he stayed in OKC, he would have had that same opportunity. But when you look at it from a business perspective, I look at it 2 ways. One is, okay, Golden State had a great year this year, but how long can you keep that team together?
Right.
All right. You have Steph, who's coming up. I think next year he's up.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, and then you got, Draymond Green. So how many years can he actually stay top teams and pay everybody? So that's the complexity you look at. And you look at Durant's deal. I venture to say after next year he'll be gone out of there, or he has an opportunity to leave there. So it's how long you can keep it together. But yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic.
And you mentioned that idea that had he stayed on the Thunder, he possibly still could have had a chance to win. I think that's interesting to look at. The Western Conference Finals in the 2015-16 NBA season, OKC is up 3-1 at one point. And then the Warriors just come marching all the way back. But the Thunder had a realistic chance to make the finals that season. And it can be debated whether or not they would have been a match for Cleveland. But I figure if you can go up 3-1 on a team, you can beat them in a 7-game series. Even if it doesn't happen in that specific instance, it's possible. In some cases, it's likely, you know? So
I think one aspect too, Matt, that you got to look at from a player perspective. Sometimes you don't hear everything that goes on.
That's definitely true.
And so I'm sure Durant's looking at it and saying, okay, what is OKC going to do to actually get us better?
Right.
And are they going to spend the money to get us better? Are they going to bring in the extra better players? Because there were some other players there too OKC had that they let go and didn't redo their deals.
Right.
Where if they kept those guys and kept Durant, those guys would have been the Golden State Warriors, who are now the Golden State Warriors.
And I think if you're in the mind of Kevin Durant, you know, from a fan, I think a lot of fans appreciate that aspect of loyalty. You know,
Right.
Durant he came into the league as a member of the Oklahoma City Thunder, and for a long time it seemed like he was going to stay a member of the Thunder for his entire career. But if you have the chance to go to a team that had just made the finals in back-to-back seasons, that came off of a 73-win season,
Right.
a team that was on the verge of winning back-to-back titles. They were one game away, and it really looked likely. I remember they had to go to Oracle twice
Right.
after they led 3-1 in that series. You know, if you're Durant, you have the choice of, I can go back to the Thunder with a player like Russell Westbrook who just gets better every season, and I have a good chance to beat the Warriors. Or I could go to Golden State, where no team, not even the Cavaliers, have a good chance of beating us. And if you look at it like that, it's hard for Durant to say no, because not a lot of players are going to have that opportunity where a title is nearly guaranteed.
Especially when he's been in OKC for a while. He was there for a couple of years.
Right.
And, you know, he has to think sooner or later your clock's ticking, and you want to actually get that championship before it's too late.
Yeah.
The interesting thing to look at, too, Matt, I think, is in terms of, you know, they always say, oh, the bigger market teams in other sports or in basketball are always, you know, the juggernauts, the big market teams, where you got Miami Heat, you got, back in the day, you had the Lakers. But it's funny because you're seeing the smaller market teams build those super teams.
Right.
Like Golden State, not a big market, small market team, but they were able to build that super team. And I think the one way you got to look at it is they built the majority of that team through the draft.
Yeah.
They drafted well.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a good organization that actually drafts well, you know, they're going to have an opportunity where they can add one or two big pieces and then hit that next level. As a player agent, you want to look at teams that actually do have a good organizational standpoint, where they're able to draft well, their management's well, and they pay their players. Once the time comes, they actually pay their guys.
Right. And let me ask you, Golden State, you know, you look at that 2015-16 season where they had 73 wins with, like you said, all guys pretty much that they drafted. You know, you had an Andre Iguodala who, you know, came from the 76ers. But, you know, Curry, Thompson, Green, they're all homegrown Golden State picks. If you're representing a player going into an organization like Golden State before they had all of this success in recent years, do you look at a coach like Steve Kerr? You know, what separates him from other coaches in the league?
He's a winner.
He's a winner.
I remember him with the Bulls. He was
Right.
a winner. He hit so many clutch shots with the Bulls,
Mm-hmm.
but he's a winner, and he knows how to bring those teams and those players to win.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another key component. And don't forget, didn't they have Harden at one point too?
They did.
Imagine if they had Harden, Westbrook, and KD.
That's a super team right
That's
there.
super team. And how'd they get them? Drafted them.
They drafted him.
They drafted them.
That's right.
But the difference between OKC, and we'll see how Golden State handles it, but OKC didn't keep those guys,
Mm-hmm.
right? They let Harden, they traded him or let him go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, now we're at an interesting point in the history, the legacy of the NBA, because you've had the same two teams in the finals for 3 straight seasons. And some fans are not exactly happy about that, because you have organizations like Cleveland and Golden State trying their best to build these super teams to get as many all-NBA players as they can, so it seems. You have the Cavaliers, LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love. Um, and I ask you, what is it about Cleveland? Another pretty smaller market. They're not a New York, they're not a Boston, they're not a Philadelphia. Do you see some similar aspects into how Cleveland built up this team to how Golden State built up their team?
Different.
They're different.
Different, obviously, because look what Cleveland had to do to actually be a winner again. They had to bring LeBron back, and they had to pay him. Okay?
Right.
They didn't do it through the draft. Obviously, they drafted LeBron back in the day, but they weren't able to actually get over that hump and get that extra really good player to put him over the hump. They had to bring LeBron back to actually get to that point.
Right.
So it'd be interesting to see it's interesting to step back and watch and see what Cleveland does this offseason.
Yeah.
Do they reload and take it to another level and bring in that next guy or trade for the Paul George or whoever it is to bring them to the next level? So, or they sit back and try to keep doing what they're doing. But I don't think they can do that. Obviously, you got Golden State, who is going to be kicking some butt.
Well, you mentioned Paul George, and I think this is an incredibly interesting situation because I don't know if I've ever seen a player on the last year of their contract outwardly say that they are going to leave their current organization at the end of the season.
Yeah, publicly say it.
I mean, from a sports manager's and sports agent perspective, isn't that a strange move?
Strategy. It's a strategy because he knows he doesn't want to be there long term, and he doesn't want to sign a long-term deal, and he figured he can actually try to navigate his exit out there to where he wants to go and actually be on a winner.
Right.
That's how you do it.
But if you're an executive for a team and you see this guy, Paul George, who's saying that he does not want to be on the Pacers at the end of this season, doesn't that kind of diminish his value? He could be a guy that maybe, at around the halfway point through the season, he might get traded if the Pacers aren't doing well. But, if you're let's say you're a Cleveland and you have a legitimate chance to get Paul George, do you, from a team executive perspective, do you kind of pull back on that because it's going to be tough for him to remain in Cleveland at the end of his contract? He already said that he wants to play for the Lakers.
Right.
It
all depends what the mindset of the organization is. If I'm the GM of Cleveland, I'm going to say, is that 1 year with Paul George going to bring me a championship? Yeah. And then at that point, I got a whole year to try to convince him to stay and re-up and not go to L.A.? That's the question, if you can do that.
So if put yourself in the shoes of Paul George's agent.
Right.
Okay? You're on the last year of your deal in Indiana. What's the game plan moving forward? Where is the ideal destination for a guy like Paul George?
All depends what his goals are.
Yeah.
If he wants to win, right, you go to Cleveland, you go to one of his other teams to be a super team.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to actually get paid the max you can, and then you want to actually have other interests such as television, movies, commercials, that type of thing, all these guys do.
Right.
Then you go to L.A. So I think it's all in terms of what their goals are as a player. But I think from a manager standpoint, he's doing the right thing. He's saying, I'm going to be real with you, Indiana. I'm not going to play with you after this year.
Mm-hmm.
So get something for me now or get nothing when the time comes.
And I almost feel for Pacers fans in this situation, because, what can their organization do at this point?
Well, they could have drafted better and built a better team around him. He wouldn't be going anywhere.
Yeah. I feel like that's happened so many times in the past. You have guys on otherwise terrible teams, but you have this one superstar who just stays there his whole career. Like I think in baseball, Felix Hernandez. He's been on the Mariners for over 10 years, and they've done nothing with him.
But he keeps re-upping his contract.
Right.
So, he's making a choice to get paid where he gets paid.
In your experience, what do you think that players tend to value more? Do they value money? Do they value winning? Do they want to stay in one spot?
Majority of them, I would say it's all about the compensation.
Yeah.
It's all about the money. Compensation in the sense of they want to max out because careers are very short-lived, so they want to max out what they can earn.
Right.
So they're looking for what can be the most lucrative aspect where it can be, and then have some security as well.
Mm-hmm.
NFL is different in terms of what type of guaranteed money you get. NBA is different than NBA because NBA is fully guaranteed contracts.
Right.
You sign your deal, you're going to get that deal.
Exactly.
NFL, it's what's fully guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom line.
So, you have this, some people would describe it as an issue in the NBA with the formation of these super teams. How do you see it playing out differently in the NFL? Because I feel in the NFL it's so much harder to build up this, team of all-stars through trades. I think it's even more focused on you get your maybe 2 to 4, superstars, and then the rest of the team is kind of built around role players.
Yeah, well, the NFL is different, I think, in terms of the way it's all set up financially in their system. Because if you have good players that you really like, you have mechanisms to keep them. Okay, so in NFL, you draft a guy, you draft him high, you got him for 4 years, you got him locked in for a 4-year contract. After that 4-year contract, you can, then try to see if you want to franchise him and keep him for a 5th year.
Mm-hmm.
So you really don't have to do a really new big contract for that player until after 5 years after you draft him, where you can keep those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then presumably every year during that term of that contract, you should be drafting great players. Okay, you draft really well, and next thing you know, then you're going to have a good core. And then I think teams that are smart, they keep their core players.
Would you say it's more important to draft well in basketball or in football?
I think it's in both.
In both?
Yeah, I mean, but basketball, you have more opportunity to go out and actually buy players. In terms of if you don't draft well, then you can go out and you can spend the money. You can get free agents who are very good.
Right.
Because there's more opportunity for those players to actually be free on the free agent market.
Mm-hmm.
You have good players in the NFL, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to hit the free agent market because those teams are going to A, lock them up early, or B, franchise them and kick the can down the road. Mm-hmm. Because you franchise a guy, you can franchise him twice. You can literally franchise him 3 times, but that news never happens. And I've had, not to toot my own horn, but I've had players who've been franchised. Justin was franchised.
Right.
We were able to get a deal off of him, from franchise tender. Josh Brown to represent, Shane Graham. They were all franchise players.
Mm-hmm.
So,
now going back to this idea of the super team in basketball, we talked before we started recording here, and we were talking about how this is certainly not the first instance that the league has been dominated by these kinds of teams. I remember you mentioned that Miami Heat team back in the mid-2000s.
And even so, I mean, I was watching 30 on 30 this weekend, and we were watching, my boys, we were watching Boston, I guess it's Boston versus L.A.
Right.
The whole history of Boston Celtics versus L.A. Lakers. And as you're saying, like there was 2 teams, Golden State and Cleveland, who've been in the finals the last couple of years. Well, back when, in the 80s, 90s, it was always Boston and L.A. And they were going every year. They ended up in the finals. But you look at it in terms of dynamic of those two different franchises. Boston got their team by drafting well.
Right.
They drafted Bird, then the same year they drafted Parrish and McHale.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then they added complementary players after that. So that the difference between do you spend and build your dream team, or do you draft and build your dream team? So I think it can go both ways, but I think with the NBA, to answer your question, Matt, the NBA, it's a little bit more pronounced because you just have like two or three teams like totally dominating everybody else, and no one else has a shot.
And I feel that there was more opportunity for teams around the league back in the 80s to compete with the big names. Yes, you had the Celtics and the Lakers, pretty much routinely getting to the finals, but you have the 76ers in there, you have the Pistons in there, even the Bulls, managing to mainly it was the Sixers and the Pistons able to take titles, but the Bulls were able to upset the Celtics. And I feel now you look in the last around 10 years in the NBA, you have the Celtics and Lakers still, but I mean their teams are past their primes. The Celtics were winning because they had the big 3 and Garnett, Pierce, and Allen, and they've since departed that team. The Lakers still had Kobe Bryant and Pau Gasol. They're both gone now. You have the Heat winning with Shaq and Dwayne Wade, and then later on LeBron, Bosh, and Wade. You have the Spurs, who have been good since the late 90s with, that central figure of Tim Duncan. But you have that one oddity in the Dallas Mavericks in 2011, where you have a team with Dirk Nowitzki, probably a top 5 power forward of all time. And then you have, a few role players, I wouldn't say stars, but certainly great players like Tyson Chandler, an aging Jason Kidd. And I feel that having a team like the Mavericks that one year where they're able to upset the beast. They played David to the league's Goliath. I feel that in today's NBA, it's going to be even harder for that to happen.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Based upon the nature of the players, they're accumulating, definitely.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
And I just want to ask, do you think that there is a team in the league right now that can really stand up to a Golden State or a Cleveland or a San Antonio? I feel like you have these three heads of the league that it seems like they're so far and away above every other team.
It all depends in my mind, how they draft. Yeah. You got draft coming up next week. I mean, I think 76ers just got 2 picks in their first couple picks.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and they got, the guys that they had. They got Ben Simmons. They got the other
Joel Embiid.
Yeah. They got those 2 guys. Those are 2 cornerstones.
Absolutely.
You add 2 more quality players. They haven't been good for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think the 76ers have an opportunity to do that.
And I feel even when they were good, you look at like the early 2000s, they really only had Allen Iverson. You had Dikembe Mutombo, but he was a good shot blocker. He didn't do much else.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think the 76ers have an opportunity to do that.
Definitely. I think they put themselves in a great position. I think they're one of the better examples, assuming that their players pan out. I mean,
Simmons has been hurt a lot.
Right. They have talent, though. It's unquestionable that they are setting themselves up for success. Even if injuries end up keeping some of these players off the court, they drafted well.
And the key thing for those guys is their players are locked into longer-term deals because they're rookies. They drafted them as rookies. So
right.
That ownership, that management is going to have cost certainty. They're going to know what their costs are, so they're going to be able to have the money and the funds to actually add some big-time players. I mean, I think the 76ers could go out and get, once they have a good year where they show they turn things around, then that becomes a team that free agents look at and say, okay, I go to 76ers, I can actually win there.
Yeah.
Win a championship.
And Philadelphia is a big market. It certainly doesn't seem like it now because the Sixers have been so bad for past what seems like 5 years.
And their fans are like, they love their sports.
Right. And in all 4 leagues, they're incredibly passionate. So I think the Philadelphia will be a prime location in the future.
Well, it just came to my head too. Same thing with the Dream Team. I remember Philadelphia Eagles a couple of years back when they had Vince Young. They signed a whole bunch of free agents that quote unquote had a Dream Team, and it didn't pan out too well in football.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens sometimes, but I think there are certain guys that you draft, and when you see them play in the NBA, like a Joel Embiid,
beast.
Coming out of college, you knew that he was just an athletic monster, and he's shown in his time in the NBA that he can have success. I think you're going to see the same thing from Markelle Fultz when they take him with the first pick. You're going to see the same thing from Simmons once he gets back to the court with some regularity. They lost some pieces. They got rid of Nerlens Noel, which might have been questionable, but I want to ask, they're giving up some of those picks in the long term. I believe it was a 2021 first round pick that they gave up to Boston. Do you think that was a good trade for them? Because it seems to me like they're helping themselves right now.
Yeah, I think they're building the foundation to the house.
Right.
You got to build the foundation first, and then you can add the pieces later. So you have to give up something to build that foundation. But they're building that foundation with those core players. They'll have those core players, and then they can add, like Miami did. Remember Miami added Ray Allen?
Right.
Back in the day, they added Ray Allen, and he actually was a beast for them and scored
Absolutely.
a lot of points for them. So I think Philadelphia, by having that base, has the ability to go out and be attractive to a free agent to get that free agent to come to their team.
And then you look at Boston, getting the number 1 pick after already making the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah.
They seem to be setting themselves up for a lot of success in the future.
Well, I hate to say it, but, I'm a New Jersey guy. And New Jersey Nets, if you can look at that and say, okay, that's how you don't want to handle your franchise because they gave up a lot of picks to get players who are older and who are on the downward spiral.
Right.
So, and players they got in Garnett and those guys. And then they gave up all those picks that now they're not going to have an opportunity to get better for a long time.
Right, and I thought that was an interesting trade. I remember even thinking when it happened, because you had guys like Garnett and Pierce and Darren Williams who had a lot of success in the past. They made that trade in 2013.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
You look back to since like 2008, they had been some of the best players in basketball, but they were all in their early 30s.
That was 5 years after
You know?
those big years.
And it just seems so it raised so many questions as to whether or not these are the right moves, whether they were giving up too much. And I think, 4 years later, it's clear they did give up too much.
Yeah, it's always easy to sit back and watch after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
But even at that point, you said to yourself, okay, Garnett, he was older. He had a great career, but he was on the back nine of his career. So it didn't seem too wise at that point. Mm-hmm. So, in all sports, I mean, any of the sports, basketball, football, and even baseball, they're always looking at the age of the player. In football, they're looking at how old is this guy? Is he before 30? Is that a guy we want to invest money in?
Mm-hmm.
Free agency. And if you're at a certain age, you're going to get that money. But as you get older, unless you're a premier quarterback, it's going to be harder and harder to actually get those longer-term guaranteed contracts.
Right, and it does depend on the player too. You're going to have guys who, I look in baseball, a guy like Yoenis Cespedes. He's in his early 30s, but he plays a very athletic style. He has a big, booming swing. He really gives 110% when he's out there on the field. He's a kind of guy who's also dealt with injuries in his early 30s. So maybe when he approaches 33, 34, teams aren't going to want to give him a big deal that other players that same caliber might get at around that age. But you look in basketball at a guy like Ray Allen. He's a shooter first. He doesn't really rely on, driving to the basket or going inside getting rebounds. That skill that it takes to shoot is not necessarily going to go away with age. So when he's entering his mid-30s, he's way more likely to get a solid contract because, obviously he's going to be more susceptible to injury, but odds are that when he's healthy, he's going to pretty much keep consistently with what he's done in his earlier 30s.
And timing is everything.
Yeah.
Like in life, they say timing is everything. In the NBA and NFL and sports and professional sports, timing is everything.
Mm-hmm.
If you're that type of player like a Ray Allen that we're talking about, and you have a team that really thinks they're on a cusp of actually really winning it, and that's he's the last piece, he's going to get paid, which is, that's just the timing of it.
Well, Rob, we have a caller right now. Very fortunate to have him on first episode here of Roche Roundup. Calling in is the sports tax man himself, Robert Raiola. Rob, are you out there? Are you with us?
I am. Thank you. Always a pleasure to be on with Rob Roche. Known Rob a long time. He does a great job for his players. And thanks so much for having me on the premiere episode.
Yeah, Robert, I appreciate you coming on. Definitely sharing your insight into the tax law and the tax ramifications for players in professional sports. He's the preeminent guy when it comes to this type of stuff. So really glad to have you on here, Robert.
My pleasure.
So we were just discussing this article you wrote for Sports Illustrated back in, I believe it was 2015. And folks, article's called "For Athletes, Preparing for Tax Season is Just as Important as Anything Else." It's a great read. Definitely recommend you guys take a look at it. But Mr. Raiola, you want to just give us the rundown of it here on the show?
Sure. What people always talk about, taxes and which role does it play and how important does it work and whatnot. Take one example. You take the Ndamukong Suh. The Ndamukong Suh a couple of years ago was a free agent, and he chose to take his talents to Florida. When he signed with the Dolphins, he received $60 million guaranteed. So what I did is I say, well, what would he have got after taxes? There's no state tax in Florida. He would have paid some state tax on some of the road games against the Patriots, against the Jets, or whoever else they play in the AFC or cross conference. But also, he would have netted about $36 million after tax. If the Lions wanted to match, they would have had to pay him $65, and as Rob Roche knows, he's further into that cap. And if the Raiders wanted to match, they would have had to pay him $70.1, and he's further into their cap. So the teams in football, like the Cowboys, like the Dolphins, like the Titans, have a very unique advantage that the salary cap is done on a pre-tax basis. So with Sue's case, $60 million from the Dolphins is equal to, 70.1 from the Raiders in his pocket to net the same amount of money. So right now, those teams have a big advantage. I think ultimately what you may see, it's been talked about in the NBA, is doing the cap on an after-tax basis. There's been some talk about it. The unique team right now would really be the Raiders because they play in the worst tax state in the U.S., California. That's top rate of 13.3. But as we know, they're heading to Nevada. We don't know when, but they are heading to Nevada, and Nevada has no state tax. So that could play a role in some negotiations down the road. And Rob, what would you do if you were representing Derek Carr? His upcoming extension. How would you take that into account? You in planning his extension?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you always want to get that money guaranteed as soon as possible because you never know what happens injury-wise and stuff like that on the field. Example of this past year when Carr got hurt for the playoffs.
Yep.
But you want to get that fully guaranteed money locked in. But what Robert's speaking to, and I think which is really important from an agent perspective, is looking at that dynamic, knowing that they're going to move to Nevada. You look at the payout and be one of the few instances where you say, okay, you know what? It might be wise for me to take my payout of that, guaranteed money later on in 2020 when the Raiders are in Las Vegas, so we don't have that tax ramifications. Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that would make sense because, obviously somebody could say, well, what about the time value of money? But, 13.3% on, what did you think, Rob? At least a $25 to $30 million signing bonus, maybe 70, 80 guaranteed,
Yep.
It's big money.
Yeah, it's big money. And, the key thing is as long as it's fully guaranteed money, he's going to get that money either way. So It's just the timing of it. And I'd rather always have the timing of it where my guy gets the money, might be a little bit later, but he's going to get a lot more money a little bit later if you just wait.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think, like we talked about in the article, fellas, is that sometimes you got to really look at, and it helps if you have an agent that's willing to cooperate with you in this, is not really is the best gross deal, what's really the best net deal. So, especially in free agency and the draft choices, you have no real play in that. But I think it's important to work with the player and the agent on doing that. And Rob and I have talked about that on a couple of his deals before as to which way, if a player is going to sign with the Dolphins, well, obviously, if he was looking at the Jets would have to pay him more money to be an equal contract.
Yeah, I think it's a really important aspect of the contract negotiation that a lot of people, most likely don't even think about. Okay. But you got to have the professional to actually sit there and say, this is what you're really going to walk away with. And this is what you got to look at in terms of whether we do this deal or we don't do this deal. And you can use it as a negotiating standpoint too, to the other team. Say, listen, I can go to Miami and make X dollars, so you better up your offer if you really want to get this kid. Definitely.
That's right. And you can use that against teams like the Raiders, the Chargers, now the Rams. I mean, the Rams, think of that, Rob. If you're representing a St. Louis Ram and all of a sudden they go to California, they were paying 6% in Missouri, 1% in St. Louis, and all of a sudden that no choice to the players, they're moving to California. They're paying higher cost to live and everything and all that. Gas prices and everything is higher. And oh, by the way, you have no choice, but your taxes now double.
Yeah, and that's the important thing that you have a player that actually listens to you, and you sit down, you talk to him about it, say, it's not about the overall gross amount of what you're getting, but we're going to look at in terms of your future as to what you're really going to put in your pocket when you walk away. When you're done, we're done with this contract. What are you going to see? It's just like I remember Hainsworth, just from a contract standpoint, when Albert Hainsworth made that big contract with the Redskins back in the day. It was reported that he made crazy amounts of the contract. But you got to really sit down and look at the nuts and bolts of it and say, what's the fully guaranteed dollar? What is he really going to see of this contract? What's the reality of this contract? And that's where I think, like Robert, you alluded to it, where you can really help out in terms of saying, this is what you're going to make. This is the bottom line. This is why I think you should go to this city and play for this team because you're going to make that much more money. And basically lay it out for them in dollars and cents.
Right. I think, Rob, as you know, and you can probably elaborate on, there's probably maybe 5-6 factors as to why a guy goes to a team in free agency. Maybe he wants to win the Super Bowl. Maybe he knows the 3-4 versus the 4-3. Maybe he's familiar with the offensive or defensive coordinator. But, I think it's fair to say taxes is somewhere on that list, maybe 6th or 7th, but I think it should play a role in the contract negotiation.
Yeah, because bottom line, when you're a free agent, bottom line, where you go is where they pay the most money. Okay? And if that the consideration of what's the net tax dollar is going to be that much different from where one team to another, that's going to swing it into the team that can give them the most net dollars.
Right. And as we know in the NFL, since not for long, you don't know how many shots, if ever, you can have a shot at free agency.
Yeah. I mean, the way the system's set up, most guys only get 1 or 2 shots at the free agent apple. So you got to make your money. You got to make your guaranteed money. Definitely.
And Robert, I want to ask you. You were mentioning some of those markets where that tax issue really isn't a problem. What are some of those markets? I know you mentioned Dallas before.
Right. There's no state tax in Texas, which is a couple teams. There's no state tax in Florida. In the NFL, there's no tax out in the state of Washington, which is the Seahawks. There's also no state tax in Tennessee. So there's about 7 teams that play in the state with no tax. But also now you're going to have the Raiders, which again, this is a big thing. This will play a role, as we discussed, in Derek Carr. But down the road, and this is a little trickier, he'll play, but he may be better suited, is Khalil Mack. Because Khalil Mack, he's not up for the extension this summer. He may be up next summer. And, Rob, I don't know when they go there. Maybe it's 18, maybe it's 19, or as you mentioned, maybe it's 20. But it will be somewhere in the future. As far as the states that have a low state tax, Illinois is 3.75%. That's low. State of Pennsylvania is a little over 3. But there's a city tax in Philadelphia, which is a little higher than that, which is unusual. So I think it plays a role. But like Rob said, you want to look at all the things and look at what your best possible deal is. Now, this is in all sports. When you get drafted, so it's not a factor. But the big thing in the NFL is not so much where you live initially, but it's where you play. Right. Because as Rob knows, and as you know, if a player is playing for the Jets, okay, let's take the rookie Adams. He's in New Jersey 5 days a week on a road game practicing, and he's in New Jersey 7 days a week on a home game. So even if he's not a resident of New Jersey, he's paying tax in New Jersey on approximately 85% of his income. So even if he was in, a resident of, Florida or somewhere else, he's still going to pay tax on a lot of his income. And a player really doesn't have a choice with that where he's drafted. But, the other thing that you want to look at is, we talked about Rob before, what's deductible? Agent fees, certain fines are deductible. If a player is driving to the Jet facility and he's driving a little heavy on the pedal and he gets pulled over by a cop, that's not deductible. If he's a little late to practice and Coach Bowles finds him, that would be deductible. Basically, anything against public law would not be deductible, but everything against team or league policy would be deductible. Union dues, conditioning costs. As Rob knows, some of these players have to pay, it's a 24/7 business. But I think it's important that you have good tax advice and you work with the agent and the player on trying to make sure, that it's not what you make, it's what you keep, and you try to make sure that he's doing the best job possible. Not always that easy.
It's so cool to hear you talk about this stuff too, Robert, because most people don't think about this. Most players coming out to the NFL don't think about taxes, and they don't think about what's deductible. Okay, it's the first thing.
Well, what does that even mean, Rob?
I know, right? I can tell you, it's the first thing from their mind, and
right.
Because they're obviously focused on performing and stuff like that. But I think it's great to hear what actually is the law in terms of your expertise as to what you're doing with these players and stuff like that, and making a difference. Making a difference in terms of what they walk away with when the time is done, when they're done playing.
Right. And I think, Rob, a lot, as you know right now with the draft picks, a lot of guys are just getting their signing bonus. And they're quickly learning the difference between the gross and the net. And that they all have a partner. His name is Uncle Sam, and the IRS takes a big chunk of the signing bonus. What's very important, what you have to watch out for is these high draft picks is the federal law is that they'll take out 25% of federal tax on the first $1 million of signing bonus. Players, wow, that's a lot. But you know what? That's not enough. Because the top rate is under current law is 39.6%. So you got to make sure your player realizes if he gets $1 million signing bonus, he's very short on the withholding. So you have to plan to have more withholding or let him know that he's going to owe money come April 15th. So it's very important to communicate that to the agent and the player.
Well, that's the thing, too, is in terms of my players, too, it's been a big thing to make sure they plan appropriately so they have that money put aside from what they make so they can pay, at the end of the year, they can pay the money they owe their taxes. So
right.
It really takes planning and discipline for these guys to actually, make sure they make their payments and get it all, up to speed. One other thing, too, I want to touch on, too, Robert, you mentioned before, in terms of the salary cap. I think if I'm one of those teams that's not in those good markets like Texas or Florida and stuff like that, I'm lobbying when they do the next CBA. I'm lobbying saying you got to make it an even playing field because it's not an even playing field. And you got to give us some, deference or compensation in terms of credits or something like that on the salary cap for guys that they lose that go to the better tax advantage states. because it's not an equal.
I think that's a great point, Rob. I mean, like I said, I was working with an NBA team, and they were very perturbed. It was mentioned in the most recent NBA CBA, which starts July 1st, but it did not get passed. Basically, what they are thinking about doing is making the tax on an after-tax, the cap, on an after-tax basis. So that would equalize, the disadvantage right now that the Raiders have. But you know what? The Raiders are going to be campaigning on the opposite side of that because they're going to Nevada. But it's a huge advantage for the Cowboys, the Dolphins, and whatnot. And this goes in really all sports except for baseball. This could be an issue. So I think that you're going to hear some noise about that. Obviously, player protection and player well-being and player salaries will be utmost importance in the CBA. But I think that you are correct, that this is something that should absolutely be addressed. People say, Robert, what does it make a difference? It makes a big difference. And if you see at the beginning when in free agency, Robert, when guys sign, the guys that are signing in day one or day two that are going to the California teams, those teams are overpaying.
Yeah.
Because they have to.
They got to. Yeah, definitely.
Robert, you mentioned at one point in this article, and I think we touched upon it before, about players living in different states. You have a guy like Clayton Kershaw, plays for the Los Angeles Dodgers, but he lives in Texas, where he doesn't have to worry about taxes. And I wanted to know, in your experience, and Rob, in your experience as well, do you notice that players who have that opportunity to avoid the tax based on their residence, do you see them capitalize on it a lot?
Yeah, I have. I had, one of my players with the Houston Texans, and that was one of the reasons why he wanted to go there too, was no state income tax.
Right.
Definitely. It was a major, it was a, not the factor, but it was one of the major considerations, I can tell you that. Definitely. And, good, Rob.
I think Rob is correct. It's something that needs to be looked into. It's a little bit different in baseball. With the example I talked about Kershaw, is he's obviously one of the best pitchers of all time. But in the first year of his new deal, which is in the $200 million range, what he did was he got $22 million in compensation. He is a Texas resident but plays in California. But because of him getting 19 of the $22 million first-year compensation as a signing bonus, he was able to elude any California tax on the signing bonus. That option is not really available to football players because of the contracts and the guaranteed language. But in Kershaw's case, he did a really good job of doing that. And, he's in California during the season, yes, but he's got half his games at home, half on the road. Yes, there's other some games in California, but you have biggest opportunity in other sports than you do in football. I think it's important to look at, just because it's very difficult in the NFL because of the days that we discussed. If you play for a California team, even if you're not a resident, you're paying state tax on 85% of his income. The income. So it's important. I think it's, again, something you need to look at. The important thing is, and Rob and I have discussed this before, is that in order to be a resident of a state, you have to have nexus to that state. You have to have a driver's license. You have to be registered to vote. You really have to live there. You can't let, just a cousin or an aunt that lives in that state and use that address. That does not work.
Right. And just so the listeners know, too, they get taxed on where they actually play, Rob. Correct, Robert?
Right.
Like, say, for example,
That's right.
the Eagles, they play in Philadelphia. So they get, when they play a home game in Philadelphia, they get taxed in Philadelphia.
Yes.
But if they go to California and play, say, the Raiders now, they get taxed in California for that day.
Right. What's interesting, Rob, is that you hit the nail on the head. It's done on duty days basis. So if you're playing with the Eagles and you have a road trip to California, what happens is they'll probably go out maybe on a Friday a couple days earlier. So they'll probably pay 3 days' worth of income tax to California on that time. What you're seeing more and more now, Rob, and the Dolphins did this last year, you're seeing the East Coast teams go to the West Coast. And what do? They have back-to-back games. They're requesting to have back-to-back games in California. It's on the schedule. They'll stay out there the whole time. And this year the Dolphins went out there, and they actually went 2-0 on the trip, which was the most important thing. But they cost their players a lot of money by playing, 2 weeks back-to-back in California as opposed to flying back. The other interesting situation was the Carolina Panthers. They played a California team, and then they were going to play in Seattle. Right. Except instead of going to practice in Seattle, they stayed in California. So, again, they cost them players some money, which the team doesn't really care about. But you need to watch those road trips, and it's based on a duty days method as opposed to the actual game day.
How do they handle it, Robert, in terms of London, when the team's playing London?
Good question. The unique thing there is that, and I found this out recently, and I was kind of shocked, when they began the relationship with the UK, and this is really unusual, but it's written in agreement between the NFL and London, is that if you're a coach in the NFL, and Rob, if you're the coach and I'm the player, you are exempt from tax in agreement between the U.S. and the NFL and the UK. But as a player, I'm taxed there. So the top tax rate,
tax the players,
which is
but not the
absurd.
coaches. Okay.
That's right, which is absurd because
crazy.
if you're a coach or a front office guy and you're there, you're not paying tax, but the player is. Well, you're performing services, you're on the same plane, you're doing all that kind of stuff, but that's the agreement that they have. I think if Goodell really wants to get a team in London permanently, you're going to have to work out the travel, number one, and the taxes, number two. The top rate in the UK is 45%.
Wow.
Ours is 39.6. If our rate goes down to 35, when a player goes over there, he's not getting the full credit. In other words, he's paying tax for the week over there at 45%, only getting a credit at 35. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
You're getting screwed for playing in the UK. So I think that you'll see some sort of agreement to try to work that out. But guys don't really like to go over there for two reasons: for the travel and for the taxes. And unfortunately, now you have a lot of terrorism going on over there. So I don't know what's going to happen. But obviously, safety is paramount. But we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Definitely.
Robert, we really appreciate you taking out the time to come on the podcast with us. Hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Yeah, and I just encourage everyone to check out Robert's Twitter handle at SportsTaxMan. Is that correct, Rob?
That's correct. Glad to be on the inaugural broadcast of Roche Roundup. Good luck with the broadcast, and my pleasure to be on. Glad to appear anytime.
Appreciate it, Robert. I really appreciate your insights. Thanks, man.
My pleasure, fellas. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yep, bye.
All right, so that was Robert Raiola, the sports taxman. Happy to have him on the show with us.
Yeah, great perspective in terms of the financial aspect of taxes with athletes, which you don't hear about every day, but it's definitely an important aspect.
Well, Rob, we are fortunate to have another caller here joining us today.
There we go. We were blessed, no doubt about it, Matt.
One of your clients.
Yeah, Thomas Hennessy.
Joining us on the show today. Thomas, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well.
It's good to hear you, Thomas. How are things down in Indiana for you, boss?
They're good. We're in rookie development now, so the veterans are gone. So we're just grinding, lifting, running, and snapping every day. It's been good.
There we go. Getting bigger, stronger, faster every day, right, brother?
Yeah, getting ready for training camp.
Okay.
So, Thomas, for our listeners, tell us a little bit about yourself. One of the up-and-coming players in football.
Yeah, sure. I just graduated Duke. I was at Duke for 5 years. I walked on there, and I redshirted, and then I started the next 4 years at long snapper. And after the draft, or after the season, we didn't go to bowl games, so I got right into NFL prep. I reached out to agents. I got in touch with Rob. He seemed like a great guy, like very straightforward, and was honest and was going to help me do what I had to do to help make it to the next level. I'm originally from New York. I went to Don Bosco in North Jersey.
You played with two other clients of mine, Leonte Carew and Darius Hamilton, correct, Thomas?
Yes. Yeah, we came out the same year in 2011 on the Don Bosco National Championship team. But, yeah.
That was like a dream team, Thomas, right? Or what?
Yeah, it was a dream team. I definitely flew under the radar. But now I'm coming into the light a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Hey, Thomas, question for you. When you came out, you're at Duke, and I think you got your master's in business too, as well, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a bio undergrad, and then the first 4 years, and then I got a 1 year master's in business.
Okay. Yeah. What was your thought process of taking that journey from snapping at Duke to making the journey to a snap in the NFL? What was your thought process when you started out?
But the thought process when I started out, coming out of high school, I mean, it was just kind of one step at a time, with definitely a vision in the back of my mind of if I get good enough, hopefully one day I could play in the NFL. But first, it was just getting good enough to get a scholarship to start on a college team, and Duke offered that opportunity. So my whole freshman year, it was just getting bigger, changing my body, just trying to be a very athletic long snapper, and then obviously very accurate. And then from that point, it was just one year, one game at a time, just trying to put together a great career, and just do my thing at Duke and come through for my team there. We had success. We went to 3 consecutive bowls, won our first bowl in about 50 or 60 years. And then from that point, right after my senior season, I didn't really think too much about the NFL, to be honest. Even during my senior season, I was just really focused on putting together the best final year I could in 2016. But then after that, I got feedback from agents, from my coaches, from scouts that I had what it took for the next level. And I mean, I believed in myself as well. And so from then, it was just like go full steam ahead into this draft process.
Cool. What was there ever a moment that you said to yourself, okay, you know what? I really think I can do this in the National Football League, not football.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much as soon as I was starting in college, and not to sound like arrogant, but as soon as I started in college as a freshman, and we'd watch film of other snappers and other teams, I mean, I knew I was one of the better ones. But it's always a crapshoot for long snappers. It's a crapshoot for any position, but especially long snappers. There's so few opportunities every year. There's only 32 jobs. So I knew I was going to be good enough to hopefully play in the NFL. It was hoping to get a shot. And so you just have to work and then basically hope to get that. But yeah.
And now when you sign with the Colts, you sign it as an undrafted free agent. Who did you talk to? What did they say about your potential role with the team?
I talked to their special teams coach, Tom McMahon. I talked to him throughout the offseason. They were interested in me. I talked to him initially. He was just asking for tape back in like January and February. He watched my tape of a specialist combine. He watched my tape of pro day. And then eventually they came and visited for a private workout. And that's really where your money is made as a specialist, is the private workouts. And from that point, I mean, I just went, I did my thing. And he just said I was good, and I didn't really know what else was going to happen from that. I knew I had a good workout. But as we got closer to the draft, he just said there was a spot at the Colts for me, and I'd have a real fair shot to win the job here.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the cool thing about Thomas as a snapper is that he has the 3 tools. Okay, Thomas has the size. He's a big kid. He has the velocity to snap, and then he has the athletic ability to get down the field,
right?
To block and cover, and get down the field. You know, a lot of times with snappers, you got one or the other, but very rarely do you have all 3. And the cool thing about Thomas, I think, what the Colts like and some other teams liked as well, is that he has all 3 of those tools, and he does it really well.
Right.
And he's smart enough to actually pick up the schemes that they're doing and stuff like that as well.
How did you develop
Thank you, Rob.
You got it, Thomas. No problem, brother.
Yeah.
How did you develop those tools, in your time at high school and your time at Duke,
Sure.
Did you have an issue on any of them that you managed to work out through your career?
Yeah, I did, actually. I mean, I was never the strongest or fastest guy, which is why I got into long snapping. Really just almost to see the field at Don Bosco, because that team was so stacked. I figured long snapping would be a great way to play. Most people haven't played in the career, but like Rob said, that was kind of like a dream team of like high school football teams. And so I developed late. Like I came into high school at like 5'7", 170 pounds. And I mean, I hit my growth spurt like junior year. And that's when I got the frame of like 6'2", 6'3", but I wasn't filled out at all. So then throughout late high school and college, I really got into lifting and like running and just like transforming your body and what you can do in the weight room. So it was a long process of it didn't just like happen overnight. It was a long process of getting size. And then during that whole time, obviously I honed my snapping craft, which is where you make your money just on accuracy and velocity. But yeah.
And that was one of the things with Thomas, before in the draft process was one of the questions he had to answer was his size, weight-wise. Okay, I think at Duke you played like in the 230 somewhere sometimes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I played in the 230s at Duke. And the first time I talked to Rob, I mean, I'd looked at NFL rosters, and I'd seen guys in the 230s, 240s, 250s. I didn't know exactly where I needed to be, and Rob told me to get up over 240. So I worked on doing that immediately, and then also showing that I was still athletic at that weight by putting up good numbers and times at pro day. Yeah.
Yeah. When Coach McMahon came down to work you out, right? What's going through your mind at that point in time, Thomas? Okay, what are you thinking when you're sitting out in the field working out with him and stuff like that?
I really wasn't even thinking. I had just come off pro day 2 weeks before, another workout, and then local days with the Giants and Jets. the Thursday and Friday before that Monday. So I was just kind of like on a workout circuit mode, just like grinding. And so when it got to that Monday, I just viewed it kind of as like another workout, not like that this was going to like make or break or anything. So, I just went. He had me look at an iPad and learn like NFL punt schemes. And then we went on the field and we did a pretty long workout. He definitely like put me through the ringer doing punt snaps, protecting. So, I was just trying to learn and just trying to do the best I could. Yeah.
Okay.
So you've worked out with the Colts since you've been drafted. You've met the guys on the team. As a specialist, it must be pretty great to work with a guy like Adam Vinatieri at the kicker spot.
Yeah, it's incredible working with Adam so far. He knows like all the subtleties of the game, all the situational things to know as a snapper. So we've just been working, trying to get the laces, and just trying to build that trust with him and the punter, Jeff Locke, and another rookie punter, Rigo Sanchez, who are here competing. So yeah, it's been awesome having Adam. He's a legend. He's been in the league like 22 years, and he carries himself like a pro, and you can see part of the reason why he's so successful.
And you just miss out on Pat McAfee at the punter spot.
Yeah, I did. I just missed out on him retiring. I met him the other night at a Liberty softball game, very short. Didn't get to talk much, but he's a character.
Oh, certainly. That's why he's writing for Barstool now.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying the experience, Thomas, or what down there?
Yeah, the experience has been awesome. It's definitely a little bit of a grind. The rookies are, just because of the collective bargaining agreement, the rookies have way longer hours than the veterans. So we're in the building 10 or 11 hours when they're out in 5 or 6 hours. So it's just been a grind, but I appreciate it because I'm a rookie, so I'm just trying to learn as much as I can and just get as game ready as possible, as quickly as possible. So yeah, I'm definitely enjoying it. I'm in the NFL. I keep telling myself every day, it's unbelievable.
There we go.
What do you think has been the most challenging aspect? Is it that grind that you mentioned, or what's tough about this new journey that you've embarked on?
Yeah, the toughest part is honestly probably the grind, just because it never stopped after. We didn't go to a bowl game, so literally right after our last game in November against Miami, I started trying to prep for the NFL to get in the best shape of my life, snapping and physically. So, just knowing how much you have ahead, and it can be hard to just take it one day at a time because you want to because there's still 2 more weeks of training. There's still a break. There's still training camp. So you really just have to take it one day at a time, and that can definitely be a little bit of a challenge. So I'm trying to do my best at that.
So what's your schedule from here on out, Thomas? You got what? You got some rookie training to do with the Colts. How much longer do you got to do that for?
Yeah, I'm here till June 29th, so next Thursday, so 2 weeks. And, I'm basically here from 7 a.m. to 1, and I'm snapping, watching film, lifting, running, and then we have Rookie Academy stuff where we just, it's a rookie transition program where they teach us the rules of football, how to manage our money, and all of that. But, yeah.
So you're doing it all, right?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, that's great. Matt, you have any other questions for Thomas?
No, I think we covered a good deal, right?
Yeah, no doubt. Thomas, I appreciate you coming on here for our inaugural podcast and just a unique perspective on your journey into the NFL. Cool stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Matt. Thank you guys for having me on.
All right, buddy. Good talking to you, man.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
So that was Thomas Hennessy, long snapper on the Indianapolis Colts, and a client of yours.
Yeah, he's a good one. I'll tell you what.
When did you sign him?
I signed him after he got done at Duke, so I probably signed him in December. Yeah, signed him in December and got him training, got him working out, and made sure he gained some weight. And got his tape out there. I think it's funny, Matt, when he first started coming out. If you look on all those crazy websites, they had him ranked as the 11th best long snapper coming out.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, and now he's doing his stuff down in Indianapolis.
Yeah. So one of the hopes that we have for Roche Roundup every episode, we're trying to get another one of your clients on. So on the next show, hopefully we'll.
Yeah, you got to tune in. You got to tune in and find out which client's going to be on next week.
That's right. So I think that's going to do it here for the opening episode. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
I'd say a pretty cool experience, Matt. I really appreciate you putting this together, and good stuff. Definitely.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to the next episode. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in to the first episode of Roche Roundup. For Rob Roach himself and Matt LaPola, hope you all have a great day.